I just want to first thank you for such a beautiful use of poetry and research. It's very inspiring, and that's definitely what we aim for. And I think that's the energy of this session as well, to navigate our world between the social sciences and the arts. So my name is Javier Mateos Campos. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Texas San Antonio, at UTSA. And my presentation is titled Chicanx A tographic, exploring identity and visual culture through M.E.Ch.A and the Chicanx movement. So before I start explaining the orthographic method, which is really the way in which I had envisioned this session originally, I want to make clear that, of course, this work comes from my dissertation. And my dissertation is in M.E.Ch.A. For those who are perhaps unfamiliar with M.E.Ch.A, it's Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. It's a historical Latinx student organization that has fought for equity and justice on campus since 1969. And so my dissertation is titled Aztlán en Movimiento, an orthographic inquiry on M.E.Ch.A as a sponsor of third spaces for identity development of student activists in higher education. And in my dissertation, I aim to assess if M.E.Ch.A plays the role of a sponsor for Mechistas in the Central Valley of California, particularly as it relates to forging third spaces or safe spaces on campus. And so through a qualitative study with an arts-based approach called Tography, which I'll explain in a second, I seek to assess the type of third spaces, if any, that are produced and if they have an effect on the identity development of Mechistas. So I'm using the orthographic method on my dissertation, and that's the method I want to introduce it because it's a very little known method here in the States and very little used. And in order to get started with the orthographic method, I wanted to come up and share with everyone a little bit of the story of a perhaps less known character of the Chicano movement and of M.E.Ch.A. His name was Ricardo Falcón. And Ricardo Falcón was the UMAS assistant director. UMAS stands for United Mexican American Students. UMAS was a predecessor of M.E.Ch.A. And Ricardo Falcón, he was way more than just an assistant director of UMAS. Falcón was a charismatic, up-and-coming young Chicano leader, a law student, a graduate student. And he became very popular in 1970s, in the early 70s, and these brought, of course, the attention of different parties. And Ricardo Falcón tragically shares a very tragic fate, such as many other social leaders of his time. Ricardo Falcón was murdered in a gas station in New Mexico under really suspicious circumstances. Not to say, but to say that he got targeted by the infamous FBI COINTELPRO. I wanted to start with Falcón's story because when I was doing the archival work for my dissertation, for the orthographic method, I stumbled across his story, and really the whole process taught me about what does archival research even means, what does that actually does. And in order to start us with this part of the presentation, I want to read a brief citation, a brief quote from Arlette Farge, and she says, "The archive is like a forest without clearings, but by inhabiting it for a long time, your eyes become accustomed to the dark, and you can make out the outline of the trees." So what Farge is telling us is that in order for the archive to start revealing their secrets, we have to spend time with it. We have to let our eyes marinate that we can learn how to read it, and so the archive really starts speaking to us back. And in my journey, I came across newsletters, posters, flyers, memos, poetry, notes, different type of artwork, announcements, little notes that people were writing. And also I came across two very important publications. La Raza magazine, which UCLA has an impressive digitalized collection, which is free to access, and also Revista Caracol from San Antonio, Texas, where I'm from. And so as I started engaging with the archives, I realized that the archives were revealing a fragmented world in which I only had access to bits and pieces of another reality of another time. And I started noticing specific ways in which social identities were being expressed through either representations of the self or of others. And so I started framing the archive really as a vantage point that would allow me a symbolic and intellectual reconstruction of the past. The archives really allow me to uncover lives, different lives, especially lives that have become ashes. It's a tool for emotional to crack a rock, and this rock is the rock of silence. And so this brings me to what is artography? So artography is a method that offers a refreshing, dynamic research approach that creatively incorporates any art form or mix of different art forms with participants' written or verbal, later recorded and transcribed, reflections. And so it's a method that is really dynamic, it gives you a little flexibility. And artography, what it does is that it creates a liminal space between two seemingly unrelated ways of thinking, which is the social sciences and the arts. And artography achieves this liminal space, and here the name marks us the route to go by allowing the participants to engage in a liminal space between the roles of artist, that's why the A, as they're artists because they're engaging in some sort of art making or art witnessing. They're researchers because they're the ones leading the inquiry. And they're also teachers because at the same time they're teaching us about their experiences and about their reflections of what they have lived as Mechistas. Artography, I selected it to capture the storytelling of Latinx students because artography, due to its flexibility, really allowed me to approach the vast repertoire of oral resources that Latinx students come with, from jokes, stories, fables, riddles, etc. And so artography draws from Deleuze and Guattari concept of the rhizome, and they explain this concept of the rhizome as an underground stem that grows in unpredictable directions, connecting, quote, any point to any other point. And its traits are not necessarily linked to traits of the same nature. It brings into play very different regimes. And so I know Deleuze and Guattari are one of the most complex and intricate authors to read, but what is important to understand here on the rhizome is that what they were really after, they were theorizing about the interconnectivity of everything that exists, even when things may not seem related. So this really sparked my attention into incorporating collage as the art form for my artographic inquiry with Mechistas. And so the collage, and I select specifically wheat pasting collage because wheat pasting has a long tradition in social movements as a very cheap and very effective way of executing and creating public art. And so the wheat pasting collage in my dissertation will allow me to, just like the rhizome, the collage will visually maps seemingly unrelated connections, experiences, informations, and aesthetic emerging in unexpected patterns of representation. Collage also enables us to visually explore relations between different social elements of our experiences, thereby accessing to a more subconscious level of awareness. For this reason is that collage is often or can be a profoundly cathartic and healing experience, because all of a sudden things that we didn't know were there, they emerge through this juxtaposition of words, images, graphics, messaging. And so a collage really has no end. Only the creator can decide what's the finishing point, because you could keep editing and editing and editing. So in my dissertation, I theorize that the visual language of the collage will facilitate the emergence of metaphors through this juxtaposition of different elements, And these metaphors can serve us as an entry point to identify third spaces and understand the development of their identities as machistas. In my assessment, through these metaphors, the collage will allow me to trace, map, and identify participants' key moments of cultural assertiveness and transformation throughout their time in M.E.Ch.A. And so how does this look on practice? So the way that I have designed it, as I said, this is part of my dissertation that I'm currently conducting, is that we're gonna have in a half circle, we'll have collage making stations with all the images. I'm gonna have a pool of images that come from this archival research, but participants are also able to bring their own images from moments that they, or people, items, anything that they deem is important for them as machistas. And so participants will have time to conduct their individual collages. And the part that follows is my spin on the orthographic method. This is my adaptation to that liminal space between artist, researcher, and teacher that I was talking about. And I have called this part the visual dialogue. And so once participants are done with their collages, what happens is like we'll just sit in a semicircle where we can all see each other. And the visual dialogues have a minimum of 2 rounds of participation. We'll assign a chronological order for people to speak and to share. And in the first round, they explain the relationship, the themes, the items, the ideas behind their individual collages. So each participant will have the option or the ability to share it with us. That's the first round. On the second round, we're gonna do something slightly different. Is that I'm not gonna ask my participants, or I don't ask my participants to judge or to evaluate or to rank which collage is better. Opinions are secondary to the orthographic method. But really what I'm gonna ask my participants, and what I ask my participants is to act as mirrors and to see what elements of the stories, of the visual, of the graphics, of the messaging that they observe in their peers' collages, they really also speak to their own experience. And so the reason to do this is because then we move from a living inquiry that is individual, in the moment that you're creating your collage, into a collective. We collectivize the inquiry because literally participants start interneating elements of other people's collage or other peers' collage into their own. And so it really sparks a different frequency, a different way of talking between people. And that's what the visual dialogues is. That's what this interplay between artist, researcher, and teacher is about. I initially had pitched and proposed this as a 90-minute collage art making session. I was going to bring my materials, and we were all going to engage in a collage making with some of the archival work that I have done, and we're going to engage in the visual dialogues, because this methodology, I can explain it to you all, but honestly, you have to feel it to really get it. So it's a hands-on thing. But unfortunately, because I didn't have the time, or we didn't have the time available at the conference, it really put me to think, what do I do? And the way that I did is that I took the permission to do the collage for y'all, and that collage is in the shape of a bookmark that is being passed right now. So this bookmark that you have, it has historical images of M.E.Ch.A. that I collected. On one side, it has, of course, my contact information, if anybody wants to follow. But on the other side, and this is where I go with this note, when I was doing my research in the archives, and I visited from different digitalized places to the Ethnic Studies Library collection at UC Berkeley, and I came across this note. And this note, it looks like, right, like back in, whenever it was written, it's just someone's, it doesn't have any author, it's just someone's recollection of assisting M.E.Ch.A meeting. M.E.Ch.A is the Mexican American Youth Association. This is another group that came part of the Confederation of Mexican American student groups that form M.E.Ch.A. So it's the predecessor of M.E.Ch.A. And so they're really explaining there how they went to meeting, and like there was the proposal to do this committee and the other, and I'm not gonna go into the full detail, I'm gonna let you uncover that magic there. But what I wanted to do instead of the original planning, I still wanted to give you all something that I'm gonna ask you to take, to use for your readings, but also to spend some time with the little note, spend that time that is needed, the one that Arlette Farge was sharing with us, so that your eyes can be used to the darkness and you can start seeing the outline of the trees, meaning what is said but is not textually said in that note. Like, we can see how students were organizing, how they were creating committees, and right, we often forget that the Chicano movement of college campuses was largely done to undergraduates and also graduate students. We have lost that presence of graduate students and student groups. And that has also somehow dimmed its potentiality. And so what I want us to do with this bookmark is, of course, use it for your readings, which I'm sure we all do a lot of readings in this room. But you know, right now we're at the verge of a second Trump presidency. And I don't know about you, but this work has really given me fire. And so what I would love to ask from you is that take this bookmark with you, and every now and then read it and give some time, and let's see what the actual archive tells you. And for me, it's very important because it has really allowed me to gain inspiration and gain fire. And as I said, we know what's coming on the Trump presidency. We know there's going to be violence against immigrants, violence against people of color. We already lived it once, so we can only expect it to be twice as horrible this time. And for us as teachers, educators, researchers, faculty, administrators, to really let that fire from the past inform how we do our struggle and organizing. Thank you.